Welcome to another episode of the Trailblazers Experience podcast, the podcast where we have candid conversations with women sharing their career journeys. Today's a special one, and I know I say this each time. Julia is someone who I've worked with in the past, and now she's on an interesting journey as the founder of 11 as One. And I feel like it's a purpose-driven movement, driven around unity, empowerment, and just solving a problem in the marketplace with regards to sports kits for women. So really looking forward to having this amazing conversation. Julia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Antola. It's really exciting to be here. It's like the old days.
I know. I think I've loved our pre-talk that we've had, just catching up on all things in the market and, you know, the struggles, the challenges. And why I love this podcast is it gives the opportunity for you to just tell things like it is. You know, we all know the shiny highlight reel of Instagram or LinkedIn or TikTok or whichever platform you're on, but that's not really real life. Talk to me about, you know, the background story, a bit about your journey. For those who don't know you, you know, what you've started and what led you to saying, you know what, I want to become a founder versus actually running other people's businesses.
So, well, as you know, I'm a retailer. So I worked quite a long time at Smith, and then I ran the marketing team at Waterstones. And then I joined Emma Bridgewater, which is where we met, which is a homewares brand making pottery in Stoke-on-Trent and selling it all over the UK and internationally. I actually joined there on a 6-month contract and stayed for 14 years. Went to set up the marketing team and kind of got sucked into this amazing small business, founded by Emma herself and run by her and her husband, Matthew, and really enjoyed scaling the business and working out particularly the online side of it, how to recruit new customers, how to keep the customers, the importance of fantastic product, but also the story behind the brand. But alongside all of that, while I was working, I kind of decided I probably should have been a PE teacher. Sometime in my 40s, I thought, I don't know why I didn't become a PE teacher. I love sport and I really believe in the power of sport. I actually trained as a netball coach because netball was my sport when I was at school. And you know, and since then I still play today. And so outside of work, I've always done quite a lot in sport, volunteering in sport. And just around the time that I had decided to leave my role and I'd actually handed in my notice, I was looking for other jobs, I went with my daughter to buy some football shorts. And I've been quite involved in football because I run the line on the Sunday at the matches. I actually run an under-18 girls team. I love football. I have season tickets at Fulham. So I watch a lot of football. But I'd never actually played because I'm part of that generation that was told football was not for me. You know, at primary school, I was told you've got netball, you can't play football, it's not for girls. But when I went with my daughter to buy these football shorts, in an era when I thought women were playing football, what we discovered at the big brands was that they weren't stocking football kit for women. And this was after England won the Euros the first time round. So I really identified a gap in the market, and that was where it all started.
I mean, that's so interesting how a part-time role turned into 14 years in one business, isn't it? It's sometimes a testament to, I always say to people when they're asking, so, well, should I take this opportunity? I'm a fan of just say yes to the opportunity because you don't know where it would lead. And going back to the fact that, you know, sports kits, I think just in general, I think that problem that you've identified isn't just across football. I think it's across many sports, especially where there's unisex involved. Okay, so you identified the problem, and then what happened next?
Well, first of all, I was thinking, well, we'll do a bit more research. So we got home. I mean, the story was really, we went shopping to buy some shorts. We went into the big brand stores, couldn't find any. I found it quite unbelievable that they weren't selling women's football kit in the Adidas shop, the Nike shop, the other big sports retailers. And we came home and did some bit of online research, like a typical kind of competitive shop that we would have done, you know, when we were working together at Emma Bridgewater, and found that you can buy women's football kit, but there's nowhere near as much choice as there is in the men's market. And a lot of the search functionality on the website just sends you to pictures of men wearing football kit. And so for me, that just seemed like, well, you're putting barriers in the way here If you're not massively confident already about taking on a sport as a woman or a girl, and the first thing you find is, oh, there's no kit available for you, then that really is a barrier to you keeping going. So I sort of had this idea it would be a side hustle and I'd get another job when after my time at Bridgewater finished, I'd go and work somewhere else. And then we'd have this sort of side hustle idea, setting up a football brand. But we started by doing some research and going and talking to footballers. And we just, first of all, we put out a survey to all the football teams we knew. And I've got, friends that play in football team. My sister plays in a football team, my daughters, lots of people. And the overwhelming feedback was that there's a need for football kit design for women. And we found that about a third of women were wearing men's kit. So kit that actually said, men on the back. About a third were wearing kit that they wore for other sports, maybe gym shorts, and they just felt it wasn't great for football, but it's what they could find. And about a third had kit that was officially called women's kit. But even they felt a lot of the shorts were too tight on the thigh, too baggy in the crotch. The drawstrings were too long. They just weren't really designed for women. And so what started as a side hustle, once I realized there was actually a big market here and an opportunity, became something a bit more like, okay, let's get it going and see if we can get the business running over the next kind of few years and establish if there really is a need there. And that's how it started.
Yeah, and you sort of like have just spoke through a playbook for how to identify if there's even a product here for the market, isn't it? It's like, okay, there's a problem you wanted to solve for yourself. You went on and asked the marketplace and said, is this really a problem? And what is it? What are the key stats? And I guess getting back the answers that actually there's an opportunity here. Were you excited, or were you like, okay, I know what it's like to run businesses with large teams, but now it's just me, founder and intern number one. How do I go about this?
Well, it's interesting. One of the things I've definitely learned is being a founder is totally different to scaling a business that already exists. And someone I met quite early on who's also a founder said to me, enjoy this really early stage where you've got this amazing idea and you meet a lot of people who are quite endorsing of your idea because there is a gap there and they're talking about it. But she said, just enjoy that because it's going to get harder. And she was totally right, because at the beginning, it's all lots of interesting conversations. You're building lots of networks, you're chatting to people, but at that point you haven't kind of committed totally to it. Because, I was just finishing working at Bridgewater, had lots of other things going on. And I was kind of thinking, well, this could be my future, or I could get another job. Then, now wind on a year and a bit, and this is what I've committed to. So now it's a lot more real. So now I really have to make it work. And I think what's been interesting is I've learned quite a lot about myself. So I thought I was kind of really bad at networking or anything you might consider to be sales. And really, my experiences in marketing, quite analytical marketing, but I thought I'm good at that. Actually, what I feel now is I love the networking side. I love meeting people. I love talking about my brand and talking about other similar kind of brands, talking to people in that area. I'm finding the marketing really difficult. And so I've just learned things about what I get energy from, what I enjoy, what I'm good at, what is always at the bottom of my list because I really don't want to do it, which I just wasn't as aware of previously, I don't think.
Does that mean now that you've identified that, are those the things that you're outsourcing then?
Yeah, so that's what I'm looking at right now. I mean, so far I've got some brilliant people helping me on a kind of very part-time or freelance basis. And now I'm thinking, okay, I've established the basics of the business, but I'm going to need some support, particularly from a kind of brand marketing top of funnel work. And so, yes, I'm talking to people about outsourcing that. But again, working out what to outsource, what to do yourself, where to put your focus, which, in previous roles, I've never struggled with that. Whereas now when it's your own business, suddenly everything feels a bit more precious. You don't want to give anything up. On the other hand, you've got to recognize you're not the right person to do everything.
And everything feels important, isn't it? You're looking at all these things need doing, but actually, like you said, if it's landing at the bottom of the list, then actually it might be that someone external with that experience might be the best place to do it as well.
Exactly that.
You talked about your early experiences. So, if someone looks at your LinkedIn and all the businesses that you've worked for, what early experiences have shaped your values just around, leadership, teamwork, community? Because I've also seen as a result of you focusing now on football, your commitments and, you're sitting on boards or as an ed, you are now focusing in that industry and sectors as well, which probably wasn't your plan initially. What experiences shaped your values around that?
Yeah, it wasn't my plan initially, but again, kind of with hindsight, I've always loved sport. And when I look at my family, my maternal grandma, my nana, she believed that sport could solve all problems. That really was what she believed. A lot of members of my family are football coaches or rugby coaches or hockey coaches. A lot of them work in a volunteer kind of role across sport. And my mum, years ago, she's a doctor, but she set up a kind of Sunday hockey, very casual, everyone playing hockey on the Sunday in the local village, because she really believed in getting lots of people out, enjoying physical activity, being part of a team. So I think all of those influences probably, sport was a big part of my life, but I'd never considered it could also be a career. And I don't know if that was something about growing up in the 80s when careers were it was all quite formulaic. The idea that
Very rigid as well.
very rigid, the idea that you could kind of, go through school and then come out the other end and get a job, but it might not be one job. You might have 2 or 3 jobs, which people do now much more. You might move between jobs very quickly. That sort of didn't exist. There was some pretty, as you say, it was very rigid where you went on to work after school or university. So it hadn't really occurred to me that you could have, you could work in sport and you could also work in a commercial arena at the same time, that you could bring the two things together. So I think those were the things that influenced me. In terms of leadership, I think you talked about what I was influenced by at work when I first started. The beauty of working in retail, and you'll know this, is that, retail is full of people who are managing people. That is a big part of a retail business, particularly when I started in retail, retail was shops. It wasn't websites. And so a business like Smith or Waterstones was absolutely full of people whose big skill was managing people, managing operations, but leading big teams. And quite early on, you had responsibility to lead teams. And I worked with some really fantastic managers at Smith and Waterstones, who, the ones that I really found inspirational were the ones that let you have a go at something and weren't too concerned if you got, in retail, you can get something a bit wrong and you can learn from it and you can make sure that you do it better next time. And I worked for a couple of managers like that, who I found really good to work for because they gave you a lot of responsibility early on, but also you were then learning on the job, and you certainly wouldn't make that mistake again. It was a supportive environment, but it wasn't a totally controlled environment. It was, you were able to have a go and make some mistakes. And I think that sort of fed into my way of working as well. I like to give people space to try things, and I like to trust people to get on with things, and I like to be collaborative in the way that we approach a project together.
Totally agree. I always say to teams that I'd rather you ask for forgiveness and not do something, try it, and as long as it's not detrimental to the business, but like, go ahead, try. What's the worst that could happen, versus waiting for someone to be prescriptive of telling you what to do. And to your point, that's how you learn, that's how you grow, that's how you develop. All these skills that you're utilizing now as a founder have come from that, isn't it?
Well, and even more so when you're online, right? Because we had, obviously, when we were working with retail stores, everything needs masses of planning, but it is a safe space to try things out, because the very worst that's going to happen is you're going to have too much stock and you're going to have to
Yeah.
discount it and not make quite so much margin, right? You're dealing with it, it's quite simple. You're not dealing with anything too risky, as long as you're following all the important rules. But on websites, so much testing and learning, things can move so quickly, and you really have to take an approach which is, we're going to try this, and if it doesn't work, we're going to change it, and we're going to try something different. And that's one of the things I I love about e-com is that you can always be testing and learning, and it's very measurable. That's the other thing with, it's totally changed the way you approach marketing in particular, because every single thing you do is measurable.
Yeah, and you can easily pivot onto doing something different. But I always remember the stock challenges that I've also faced, no matter which brand I've worked for, where you go in the warehouse and you can see that big decision and you're overstock and you're still using it for marketing, if with purchase, you're still using it for this and so on. But at that point in time, you just have to make a decision, and it's okay. I think that's always been a very big learning. How do you shape your brand's identity? So you've launched a brand, you know what you stand for, but brand identity is so important, isn't it? Messaging, because everybody wants to know who you are, what your purpose is, I think, especially for the end consumer. How did you go about doing that?
So originally with my brand, I had this idea, and I actually had a different working title for the brand. And I went to see a friend of mine. He's a friend of a friend, but he runs a branding agency. And I just kind of had this initial idea. And my friend said, "Oh, go and talk to him. He'll be great." And when I went to talk to him, he had this team of people in his business, and they were just so interested and engaged in the idea of a women's football kit brand. And quite early on, they were really gentle with me, but they made it clear that my original working title was not good. And it's hard, isn't it, when it's your idea and you don't really want to let go of it? But they were totally right. We did some research with customers and came up with some different names, which we then researched further. But also we then identified, what is the purpose behind the brand? So the purpose is to give everyone access to that football feeling. And we came to that because we spoke to women who played football, and they said they play football because of how it makes them feel, the sense of belonging, the sense of community, the fact that when you're on the pitch, you forget about everything else, all your worries. It's that 1 hour in the week when you relax. You're not thinking about all the other people you need to be. You're just thinking about the person you are on the pitch. The accessibility, wanting to be a football brand that is for everybody. It's not elite. You can be totally new to the game, or you can be really experienced, but 11 is one is for you. So I worked with the agency called Saboteur on the project to do this, and they've been fantastic because they've been a really good combination of believing in me and the vision for the brand, but being really happy to challenge as well. And I think that's invaluable when you're at the early stages of a business, to have someone kind of by your side who can say to you, "Yeah, I know you like that name, but it's definitely not going to work. But we really believe in the vision. And so we want to help you, get to the best possible place you can." And again, what started with a project, I started on a project with them with kind of a limited budget, and they've just been such an important part of delivering the brand. And I'm still chatting to them all the time because I'm really keen to get their point of view on everything.
I mean, that's so amazing. And I think the biggest lesson here, and I also like to say for the audience, is if you don't have the budget to do, what you've just done. Spoke to another founder who she basically used her Instagram to ask, her followers what they thought of the name, what they thought of the brand, what it means to them. So basically doing the same exercise, but from a community perspective. And I think at the time when she started her brand, she had like 50 followers, and started from there because she said, "Look, I don't have the money, but that's the same thing. Is this the right name? What does this represent? What does this mean to you?" And that's been her trajectory. So the basics, the fundamentals are there, isn't it? Whether you have the budget to use a brand agency or you don't, you still have to ask all these questions and not be too precious, like you said about the lane. I love 11 as one. I mean, it's brilliant.
I think that's exactly right there about asking. Someone else gave me some advice, which was you've just got to get out there and talk to people. And we were talking a bit about this earlier. There are lots of different views on how quickly you kind of move to launching your brand and how perfect you make everything first. I've got to get the brand out there, and then we'll build it and we'll take feedback as we go. And obviously some people spend a lot longer getting the exact right product and the perfect marketing plan and building the kind of followers. And that's not what I've gone for a different route. And I think, as you were saying with your friend's brand, there are so many easy ways to get feedback now. You can write up a survey really quickly and send it out to everybody. And people are really keen to give you feedback, particularly if they're interested in what you're doing. There are so many groups you can join of small founders, founder-led businesses, women running founder-led businesses. And I found those kind of networks to be really invaluable. And I've just really been really bowled over actually by how much support people are happy to give and how much we can help each other. So I've got a couple of friends that run businesses. One is much further advanced than me. She's been running her business for 10 years. But we do these working sessions now where we'll spend kind of an hour on her business, an hour on my business, and we both are advisors to each other. What's been quite interesting is I'm really confident giving her advice on her business, and she's really confident giving me advice on my business, but we're both not very confident at taking the advice for our own business. I think, but I think those kind of relationships can be really fantastic because you're helping each other, but you're getting a different perspective on your business, which I found really, really useful.
Do you think a lot of that has come from, because my next question was going to be, do you think women are craving community and purposeless brands, purpose-led brands? But is that because, less than 3% of funding goes to women, founder-led brands? Is that because we're not getting the money that we need to fuel our brands? Is that the reason why we've decided actually if we're stronger together, if we build those communities, those networks, and we'll get further along because, the big cash from investors isn't there? Is that why that's come about?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's an interesting question. I mean, definitely female founder businesses are underinvested in, and there's a lot of evidence to show that. And there are some really great organizations aiming to support, more investment into female brands. But I think on the point about are people sort of craving purpose-led brands and are people happier to buy from women-owned brands, I think my view on this is it's a great secondary kind of brand story, but you have to be offering a really good product that is filling a gap in the market. And I always felt this also at Emma Bridgewater, where there was a lot of interest in the fact that it was made in the UK, but that's not enough. You've got to be creating product people really, really want to buy. And then if they also are interested in buying from the UK, that's a great thing. And it also kind of, at some times, it's more important because, I don't know, it's 2012 and the Olympics are on, so all the big retailers want to buy British because that's part of the kind of feel at the time. But most of the time, the purpose-led part of your business is important, but it's not enough. So I really believe in the purpose, but I also think you've got to be doing something that fills a gap in the market because it won't sustain you if all you have is a fantastic purpose.
Rory Sutherland, the marketing guru, because I love watching him and just listening to his anecdotes and stories, says if you don't have a great product, it doesn't really matter. You have to have a great product and then everything else follows because that's what's going to, like you said, sustain you. It's easier to market a great product, It's more difficult to polish a turd, basically, as well. You're just throwing money at it and it's not working as well. And there's such great ideas out there, but not enough great products. So that's what I've seen as well. And, I have boys that play football. But what I saw was when the young girls were starting as well, I also find it very interesting to say, oh, so they don't have their own kit. Or even like in the gym sometimes, when the founders of gyms are saying, we're going to create hoodies and crew necks and shirts, they focus it on a block that's a men's design, not even thinking, oh, what about the women who are here? They might want something that's differently shaped. But it's just, I guess, because they've always done it that way as well. So seeing that you've gone about it and thought and said, look, there's a problem that I can solve in the market. And if there's a great product, that's even brilliant.
Well, and that's definitely true about there are lots and lots of examples, aren't there, of product that's designed for men, and clothing's a really good example of it. Firefighters, suits, scrubs for doctors, which my sister had that exact experience
My
in
sister as well. Yeah. Yeah.
too, right? They just, if you're a 5 foot something woman, their scrubs are always far too long for you. And sports kit's no different. And I think, people talk about this idea that you kind of shrink it and pink it. So you take what works in a men's sport and you just make it a bit smaller and change the color. And then this other trend that I really hate is you call things unisex. And what the thing for me is, if you take the same shape of a pair of shorts and say unisex, that might feel a bit more acceptable to a woman than wearing a pair of shorts that says men's or youth, which is the other thing they tend to say on boys, but it doesn't make it the right shape shorts. And what I think we should be offering for women is choice. And of course, there will be women who want to wear unisex shorts, and that's totally fine. But at the moment, there isn't much choice. And it's the same for, girls in PE at school. What we're learning more and more, and there are some organisations making a really big difference, like Tess Howard and Inclusive Sportswear, or Mavericks netball team, who recently launched a whole new kit for their players where you have choice. And that's what I want to be part of. I want to be part of of a kind of movement that says, I'm not saying that the shorts and shirts that I'm going to offer are the thing that every woman will want to wear, but I do say it's part of giving more choice, so that if you're a woman that wants to play football, whatever shape and size you are, whatever style you want to show, there's shorts and a shirt and leggings and a quarter zip and socks that work for you, because you belong here as much as anyone else. And I think that's what's been missing. Football, been such a male-dominated sport, including women being banned from playing on FA grounds for 50 years between 1921 and 1971. It's taken a long, long time really for women to feel like they can be part of the game. And even now, a lot of football matches you go to, grassroots matches on a Sunday like the one I was at yesterday, a lot of people at a senior position in the game are men. In an under 18 girls match, the ref tends to be a man. The people running the lines tend to be men, although I try and do it whenever I possibly can. The coaches tend to be men. And we just need a mixture. The men in the game are brilliant, but we need for there sometimes to also be women in the game, whether it's designing the kit and selling the kit, or running the line, or being the ref, or coaching. All of those roles, we need to have men and women represented.
You go about increasing representation? Because I think a lot of the time when I've spoken to women, so I speak to also a lot of women of color, and they'll ask me what do I do for a job role, and how did I get into it, and how did I rise through the ranks. And a lot of the time, because in school, when they've got career days, it's there are not very many people coming to the schools who have done something different, or have, been a trailblazer in that sport and area and broken through. How do we encourage that? Because I feel that sometimes, more the conversations I've been having is either women are scared to take that leap, or they don't think the opportunity exists, or they don't think they can create the opportunity, or even lastly, that inferiority complex of, I will be the only woman there, which most of the cases you might be, but at least you're trailblazing through that door.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. I think FIFA have announced this week, haven't they, or maybe last week, that coaches now, teams at certain levels, have to have female coaches. And I do believe in quotas. I know there's some debate about them, but I do believe in quotas when certain groups are significantly underrepresented, because I really do think that you should represent the community. I think decision making is better if you've got the people at the top who are a representative mix. So I just think there are so many examples where the wrong decision has been made because the people making the decision don't represent the people they're making that decision for. And some of it's, just so obvious. If you have someone in the room who understands what everyone else is going through,
You can say,
then you
hello
could say,
here. Yeah.
hold on here. This is,
Yeah.
and I think that's true of all organisations. It should be representative. So, if you've got lots of young girls playing football, you should have women at the top of that organization, and you should be listening to the girls as well. So I do believe in quotas in some instances. I think you've got to be really thoughtful about how the quotas are used, when you stop using those quotas, because the idea is obviously to get to a level where there's good representation. I also think you've got to be supporting women who are the first person in the room to do something, because it's, I mean, you know a lot better than me, being the only person is really difficult sometimes. And I think when you get one girl who's a coach or one woman who's a coach in a club where there are 35 coaches and there's one woman, that's not really, it's not representative, and you feel very lonely. And you haven't got anyone that you can kind of talk to about the difficult things, and you're not the majority voice. I think once you get to the point where you've got 5 female coaches and a bit of a network, then it can start to grow. So I think you need support for those people who are trailblazing, whether it's, a network of support, some extra coaching, a mentor. I think all of those things are really important, because what tends to happen is you get one woman or one person who's in some way different, representing the group that they should be representing, and then they leave and another one joins, but you don't get any critical mass. And that's certainly what I've seen at the club that I work in. We tend to have one female coach, and we've had one female coach, different person rotating around for about 5
You
years.
just keep replacing that one, yeah.
Right. And it's very hard to find female coaches. I understand all of that. But then we do need programs in place and quotas, because if you said we must have 30% of our coaches being female in 5 years' time, you'd find a way to do it.
Then you're working toward, you need to have a goal, isn't it, as well? But also going back to, I think there's so many communities, networks that are now, it doesn't really matter what sports, where there is an opportunity to take part and have an impact, which I'm hoping through another positive, I guess, of social media. There's that, that algorithm where it just spreads like wildfire of the opportunities that are there, and more job posts. I think Female Founders Rise does a thing where every week on the WhatsApp group, there's a job post of all the jobs that are available, and you can share them with different women, and you think, oh, you might be good for this. You should go for it. So it's definitely gotten better, where we are utilizing our social currency in terms of share of voice to amplify that. But it's still a long road, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think transparency also matters. So your point about them sharing all the jobs posts, I know the Women's Sports Collective, which is another great organisation, they do monthly jobs roundup, and all the jobs on there have salaries attached. So it's not hidden, it's all very transparent. I think recruiting openly is really important to get, and recruiting in the right places is really important to get diverse applicants. I think it really worries me when organisations don't recruit openly, or this whole kind of idea of there's a network and you tap someone on the shoulder and then they get the job. That's never going to lead to a kind of more diverse leadership. And I think you need the diversity at the top of organisations, because that's where a lot of decisions are made. So any transparency in terms of recruitment is really, really important.
What are some of the challenges you've had? So you've started the brand. What are some challenges that you face where you're like, oh my goodness, what is this going on? I think we were talking about some in the pre-call. And the reason why I ask this is because I think it's important to share that as well. So any founders who are out there just know that this is not a straight journey. There are going to be ups and downs.
I mean, yeah, I've definitely had some challenges. Interestingly, I think different people have different challenges, and a lot of that is to do with what you enjoy and what you feel you're good at and what gives you energy. But I think a lot of people would say sourcing is quite difficult. Finding someone, when you're a brand new business, finding someone to manufacture the product for you when you've got no track record, no history, that's definitely difficult. And I found that too. And I found a fantastic factory who are happy to take me on, which has been great. But, when you're brand new, you've got to have quite low minimum orders. And so we know from having worked in a business that runs a factory, it's really difficult to take on small new orders.
They actually don't like it. Yeah.
No, you don't like it. And I really relate back to when we were at Emma Bridgewater, because I can see myself thinking, well, why would we take that small order from a small business that has no track record? So I really appreciate the factories that are happy to take on small businesses. But they have to believe that there's a future in that brand to do it. So that's been kind of operationally quite difficult. But I would say the other thing that I find is I really find working on my own hard. Like, I love being part of a team. I like being in the workplace, in an office. I've never been great at being kind of at home. So the other thing I found hard is just the things I've had to do on my own and motivating myself to do them and not procrastinating too much. And that's really surprised me because I'm usually quite kind of driven and I get on with things, but I find myself procrastinating much more than I ever would have done when I worked in an organization. And when I've spoken to other founders, that doesn't seem to surprise them. There seems to be a feeling that that is quite difficult. It's quite easy to sit on things that you know you should be doing and just not do them. Yeah, so that's been a really hard thing too.
Yeah, it's almost as if you need that accountability founder buddy, isn't it? Or even while you're working, you're both logged on to something. And even if it's just background noise, there's another founder who's doing that work. And yeah, because we are creatures of habit. We thrive when other people are around us. Our best ideas come around and we're driven in that way. And you're right, the founder journey is very lonely, as it is. But yeah, you need to get out a bit more.
Yeah, I do. Well, I do try to, and that makes a massive difference. Honestly, it makes a huge difference when you just go, when you go and meet people. But sometimes you also have to do the boring stuff, right?
The boring stuff, yeah.
You can't spend your whole
Setting up
time.
product, uploading it onto your website, that
Right,
kind of stuff.
exactly.
The things that you don't really want to do. What impact do you hope for 11 as one to have? So if you have like a forward view, obviously we launched last year in July, isn't it? So you'll be coming up to a 1 year anniversary. What impact have you had now, having launched? And what's the forward view of what impact you'd love to have?
Well, the impact I would love to have is to change the way that people think about sportswear for women and to give more choice and to recognize that the more choice you have, the more likely it is that women come back to sport or stay in sport and girls stay in sport through their teenage years. And particularly with football, I'd like, the purpose is to give everyone access to that football feeling. And I'd like to be a small part of a growing market, which is opening up football to women after, 50 years of being banned from playing football on FA affiliated grounds, which is a long thing to come back from. And I'd really like to be a small part of that in terms of providing kit for women. I mean, I think what have I learned? There's definitely demand. And I've had a lot of people contact me who are part of a team that's looking for teamwear. And so I would like to move into that next, which I've just got a couple of teams I'm going to work with to do a kind of trial. So at the moment I sell direct to consumer via the website for anyone playing football anywhere, obviously looking for shorts and training tops and kit. But I'd also like
It's better, isn't it? Because it means you can get some orders if you're working with a team in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd like to move into working with a team. And also that's a chance to get lots of feedback.
Yeah.
So yeah, the first few teams I work with, they were looking for someone to design kit that actually fits them properly, having worn men's kit or unisex kit for years. And also to your previous point about purpose, I think they're looking to work with a brand that, has a real sense of purpose. But also what I'm looking for from them is lots of feedback so we can make sure that we together
Exactly.
design the best product.
I mean, that's the best gift you could actually get, isn't it? Because when they receive the product and they wear it and also for your content, I mean, there's so many benefits to working with them, and you have the direct impact. Because a lot of time as we know, you sell online, you send it. If they don't like it, they'll just send it back and leave a terrible review. But sometimes you need that direct contact with the customer to be able to make the change even swifter as well. So that's exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting.
What has this journey taught you about yourself? So you've had an amazing career on paper, and now you're sort of pivoting back to your love of sports, which is great. I guess all things come full circle. But what has this journey taught you about yourself as a leader, as a woman, just as a human being?
Well, really interesting. I feel like I've learned lots of new things and I've really enjoyed that. And there are some things that I thought I just was no good at. Like I never would have thought I could found a business. As I think I said previously, thought I wasn't great at kind of networking and meeting people. Actually, I love that. I've started playing football So after all these years of thinking that I couldn't play, which is really crazy, I found a team. I don't know why I didn't think I could play before, because anyway, I didn't. I think that
Fulham itself, are they local?
it's in Chiswick. So the Swans FC they're called, and there's groups of them all over southwest London. And it's a great story because it was set up by the coach of a girls team, and the mums of the girls were on the sideline. And after a while they were like, why are we just standing on the sideline or going for a coffee when the girls are playing football? Why don't we actually play? So they asked the coach to set a team up for them, and it was so popular that they now have 6 teams running in different parts of southwest London.
That is so cool.
And it's absolutely brilliant. So I've learned that you can start something new in your fees, and it's really energizing. But I've also learned that in some areas I'm not as confident as I thought I was, and I really need people around me to kind of support me, to bounce ideas off. That's been quite a big learning for me. I find it hard to be working on my own. Yeah, no, basically I love it. I've also found this whole network of people working in sport that I just didn't know existed. And
right?
Really
it's
great
crazy.
network to be in.
Yeah. And all very interesting women. I remember I went to the National Running Show in Birmingham, which as a runner, you think I would have been to that show. I'd never been. So my lovely running colleague said, we should make a morning of it. And I finally met the founder of Married. And I was like, oh my God, I've heard so much about you. And she had a stand there and we had a bit of a chat. And it was interesting to say, oh my God, this. And also another friend of mine, she's a running coach, Emma. She's written a book called Find Your Pace. So she had her talk there and was selling her book. So it was just interesting of how, if you are very clear about what it is you want to do, you will find your people. And that's, I guess, what's happened with you is you've started this brand and this community that you didn't know existed. They're all coming out the woodworks because you're walking towards something that you believe in. I think that's been very clear.
Yeah, and also this is something I sort of learned from you, to be honest, but I didn't really do enough of when I was at Emma Bridgewater. But when you're working really, busy in a business, it's very easy just to be very insular and look at what's happening in the business. And I really think it's important to keep looking at what's outside the business and to take not just directly, in that market, but to be making sure you're getting ideas and input from lots of different areas. So I think that's something that I would, whatever I did in the future, whatever size 11 as one got to, or whatever I did, if I did something different, I would make sure that I was keeping lots of kind of external interests and making sure I wasn't just blinkered looking at the one business I'm in, because I think it's really good for you to keep listening to other people, keep talking to other people, build your networks in different areas. You just learn so much from everybody that you talk to, I think.
We always close the podcast by asking our amazing guests about 3 trailblazer takeaway tips they'd leave with the audience. If someone's fast forwarded all the way to the end, what will yours be?
Well, my first one would be, if you spot a gap in the market. So I always thought, if you spot a gap in the market, I assume, well, someone else would have filled it. And what I've learned is, if you spot a gap in the market, there are lots of reasons that no one else has filled it. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a go. So I would really encourage people that if you feel genuinely compelled to fill it, if you really care about it, you should pursue it, because that instinct is really, really important. So that's the first thing I would say. Don't assume someone else is doing it. Just get out there and pursue it. I would also say build your networks and work with lots of other people. And there are so many fantastic networks out there, particularly for women now. It's one of the first times actually I feel in my whole working career that being a woman actually might be an advantage right now, which I really didn't feel when I was working in big retail organizations, because there are lots of really good networks of women, and my experience has been people are so supportive. And I think so that would be my next tip. And I think my third one would be ask for help. It's kind of where we started actually at the beginning, and you were saying, so you're going to need to get some support, and that is definitely true. So don't be afraid to kind of ask for help and share quite openly. And I think I learned some of that as well from being at Emma Bridgewater, where I actually think the team there were really keen to share with the other brands in the local area. You know, we showed people around our factory. The factory was totally open. We didn't hide anything. I think all of that kind of transparency, I'm not saying be naive, but I do think be genuine and honest when you're sharing your problem and ask for help where you need it. And people will be, you know, really keen to help you out. And then you can help other people out along the way too.
Julia, this has been amazing. I know we've been planning this podcast for a while, considering I started the podcast when we were working together, isn't it?
I know.
As well, but it's been brilliant just to hear your point of view and a great brand. And it's just been great just to hear your story, and I'll be following it as we go along. It's nice to see you come full circle into your purpose.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm really excited after all this time to be on your podcast, Antola.
Amazing. For the audience, where can they find you? What are your socials? What are your handles?
Okay, so, well, we've got a website, 11as1.co.uk, and we're on Instagram, which is 11_as_1. Also, we've got LinkedIn, and we're just about to start going with TikTok as well. So, but we'd love to hear from anybody. You can always email me at hello@11as1, and I always reply.
Perfect. Yeah, you are the one answering the emails at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. For the audience, this has been the Trailblazers Experience podcast. You know the deal. Please tell another woman about the podcast. Remember to follow, like, share. We can only bring these amazing guests if you're also part of it as well. On that note, thank you. Bye.